I'm a nature nerd, so all of my metaphors, almost all of my metaphors, have to do with nature. So, so this one does as well. So, a seed knows how to wait. Most seeds wait for at least a year before starting to grow. A cherry seed can wait for 100 years with no problem. What exactly each seed is waiting for is known only to that seed. Some unique trigger combination of things is required to convince a seed to jump off the deep end and take its chance to grow. In the laboratory, we simply scratch the hard coat of a seed and add a little water, and it's enough to make almost any seed grow. Something so hard can be so easy if you just have a little help. After scientists broke open the coat of a lotus seed, they discovered that their seedling had been waiting for 2,000 years. This tiny seed had stubbornly kept up the hope of its own future while entire human civilizations rose and fell. In the right place, under the right conditions, you can finally stretch out into what you're supposed to be. So, what does that mean? The reason I brought this, and I love this image of a seed waiting to be given the right nutrients, the right amount of light, the right temperature, the right humidity to become what it's supposed to be. And I think if we're thinking about school culture, that's what it is. Yes, so the seed is the student, yes. and us as well. So in becoming the kinds of teachers that we want to be, absolutely. And so I'm a teacher trainer in Singapore, a teacher educator, and a lot of schools come to me and they say, we want you to fix this, right? And give us a checklist or give us a rubric or give us a list of steps 1 to 10 that will help us fix this. And it doesn't work like that. And so there is no magic pill. There is no magic solution. This topic is huge. And every student is different. So what works for one student might not work for another. And so I decided for this talk to pare it way back from all of and there are some beautiful systems out there. Castle, Yale has an emotional intelligence department. Stanford's doing lots of beautiful work. There are universities in the UK who are thinking about this, organizations in Australia. It's happening all over the world. And they're all coming up with their own way of measuring and checking. But we have to, just as Tina was saying this morning, we have to think about what's right for us and what's right for our students. And it's best to approach this thinking about students as individuals. Is that okay? So you might have, how many students are in your classes? 40? 20. Oh, that's all right. Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you. In Singapore, it's 40, usually. That's the average. Yeah, 58. Yeah, that's a lot of little seeds who need different things, okay? So you might have 20 seeds who need 20 different things. You might have, 40 or 58. That's a lot.
Excuse me, 40 as an average or 40 as a fixed number?
That's a hard question to answer. A little bit of both. So 40 as an average, yeah. Okay, so what are the conditions that help us to bloom? What do we need in order to bloom? And then how do we build that into our school culture? Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Before we do this, I find it a little bit useful to sell the idea that we need to make time and take time out of curriculum time for social emotional learning. So what I'd like you to do is look at this list here, and working around emotional intelligence, do you think it's true or false that these things happen? So let's look at a couple together. Teaching emotional intelligence decreases antisocial behavior and aggression. Yeah, decreases, yeah? Decreases serious discipline problems and school suspensions. Yeah? Okay, have a chat with people close to you, your elbow partners, close to you, about the others, and see if you think, is it true or is it false? Okay, are there any that you think are false? No. Yes.
It is higher in rate on average. It has nothing to do with IQ.
That you bring up a really important point, actually. There are two different measurements, perhaps, IQ and EQ. And as Tina talked about this morning, EQ is what happens when you're on the boat out at sea, right? So EQ is about navigating your emotions in difficult situations. It's about building resilience. It's a number of things. EQ, or being explicit about developing EQ, does actually impact your life success and actually does translate into, for many students, for most students, higher grades.
Because great leaders, some of them actually have a high EQ, but they don't have high IQ. Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to get into an argument with you, but I'm tempted. Let's chat after, because now we know that both EQ and IQ are changeable, are malleable. So we know that we can develop both, and that they impact each other. But that EQ is the thing that often translates to life success.
Has a specific criteria and different criteria.
They do. Okay, they are all true. Are you convinced? Is that okay? All right. Okay. Before we get into the content, I'm going to be a little bit strict with you about, well, I think it's useful to think about some principles of social emotional learning. Because like I said, what often happens is schools will say, okay, but I want a rubric, I want a checklist, I want to make a worksheet for my students that will fix all the problems in the school. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so there are some things that I want you to keep in your mind as we're talking about the content. Okay, so I've got 4 social emotional learning principles. The first one is no way is the way. So chat to somebody, elbow partner, 30 seconds. What do you think I mean? No way is the way. All right, I found somebody who's comfortable sharing her explanation of this. Thank you. So if we can have a listen.
Well, it's that there's no wrong or right. All solutions can be right, and you customize the solution according to each student and according to each case. So you come up every time with a different, maybe, method of solving the issue.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've gotten at the heart of what I mean, is that there are many pathways to developing this, to finding solutions. I'm going to flip it a little bit because I want us to think about the teacher not being the person to find the solutions all the time. So that's the next one that I want to look at. And that is the wisdom lives within. So have a quick chat, 20 seconds. What do you think I mean? Okay, let's come back together. I'm sure you have lots of wisdom that you're sharing now, but come back. Does anybody want to try? Yes, thank you.
Does nothing happen without a reason?
Interesting.
It's like everything happening, there is a reason behind it.
There is. Well, I have an idea about what that might be. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Yes, thank you. By this statement, and I know I have a fellow coach in the room, so I'm looking at you as I say this. One of the fastest ways to disempower somebody else is to give them your answer. Right? True?
True. Yeah. Coaching is only guidance and motivation. I'll give them the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about, and I say no way is the way, and teachers all the time go, yeah, I'm with you. Like every kid is different, and I'm gonna think about solutions for that kid. Blah blah blah. The problem is, as soon as a kid to you comes to you with a problem, or even another adult comes to you with a problem, the first thing you do is give them the answer. It's our tendency, because we think that's helpful as human nature, and it's not a criticism. We all do it because we know what we would do. But our way isn't necessarily somebody else's way, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on the men in the room for a moment to give an example. Women, or it's a very common conception of relationships between men and women, right? Wife comes home, she's had a really tough day at work, she tells her husband about it. What does he do? Lecture, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, we don't have to, no, I'm teasing. Thanks. Yeah, often we get, a husband will give solutions, and then the wife says, just listen, just shut up, just listen. That's all we want. But that doesn't feel helpful, right? Because we feel more helpful when we can provide a pathway for someone. But in the long run, people will stop telling you things, and you'll close off that line of communication because they feel they're not heard, and it will disempower them. So you get sort of one of two reactions. You get one, which is, I'm going to stop telling Leslie stuff because she always has the answer and she's not listening to me. Or the other thing is the person becomes dependent on you for the solution, and this happens a lot with our students, and then they blame you when it doesn't work. And you haven't helped them move forward, right? Okay, 2 more. You with me? All right. The process is the content. Have a quick chat. Okay. Does anyone want to have a go at that? Yes? Sure. Thank you.
Learning is in the journey, not getting to the end. So as simple as this, okay.
But in schools,
so through the process, we're learning, okay.
But in schools, we love the end, and we measure the end all the time.
For example, if in mathematics, if the student give me the answer without going through the process itself, I will give him a 0. So I need him to mention all details about the process to make sure that he's really understanding. So the process is what is important here. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And again, we say this, and then we measure the end product, right? We have high-stakes exams. We constantly give students a check mark or an X. We often give them a lot of easy-to-solve problems because we don't like the number of X's we see, so we make the content easier for them, right? But this relates again to our plenary talk this morning, where she was talking about the boat and loading the boat and knowing all the parts of the boat and knowing what needs to go on the boat, and then actually being at sea. And so when we're talking about social emotional learning, you can take a framework and you can dump it on your school. And I see schools do this all the time. And it doesn't work, because the change happens in those interactions, in the lived experience of these things, in the moment. And the schools that are most successful have conversations about what's working, what's not working. They change it, they're adaptable. So it's, and one of the people that I follow, who's an emotional intelligence trainer at Yale, talks about the process of becoming emotionally intelligent as womb to tomb. So that we start it when we're children, when we're babies, and we are constantly learning about ourselves, and we change until, the end, okay? So it's really not about getting to a destination. It's really about taking the understandings and experiencing them. Yes, of course, please.
I think when you want to teach a student or train a student to get from one point to another, teaching them about the process is more important than the end, because if they focus on the end, failing or not failing during will just make them just see that there's no result, failing is the end. So the process, learning the process, gives them much learning experience than just focusing on the end. It's just focusing on trusting the process itself.
Thank you. If I can give a more concrete example of this, I have seen schools put aside time for social emotional learning, right? So we have 20-minute social emotional learning lessons every day, right? That's not where the learning happens. The learning happens when a kid is crying in the hallway or has just punched another kid in the face, as I heard a story this morning about this. That's when the learning happens. It's those moments that we have to capitalize on and take the opportunity for. And if you have the background, they have a little bit of information about it, it's easier to process. Yes?
At schools, both are important, the procedure and the result.
Yes.
Because at the end, you want your kids to succeed. So I think teachers must pay attention to both. Like, we need you to succeed, but I will help you to learn, and I will customize and differentiate you so that you reach, to a point where you feel good about yourself.
So, and I think you have a really good point, but I think that applies perhaps more to curriculum. And so I see social emotional learning as something that happens alongside and with and integrated into curriculum to help support it. And it works a little differently, I would say. But I think you have a really good point. Thank you. We're going backwards. Okay. Last one. Emotions drive people. 20 seconds. Okay, sorry, come back to me. Because I do want to actually tell you some stuff today. All right, does anybody want to have a go at that? Yes, my fellow colleagues. Fine. Thank you.
And here it's a cycle. It's a cycle between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. So positive thoughts leading to optimism as an emotion. And when the student feels optimistic, it drives him for better performance as a result in a behavior. So it's a cycle between emotions and thoughts.
Yeah, great. So I don't want to get into too much technical detail because that might have some scientists in the room. So, and I'm not one. I grew up in a family of scientists, and I'm a literature person, I'm an arts person, I'm the feelings girl. I'll come to you in just a moment, yeah? So I don't know if you know this about your brain, but when you take in any information, sensory information, it goes through the emotional part of your brain before it gets to the logical part of your brain. Every piece of information you take in. Yes, it's this one. That's right. Do you know what it's called? This little part. So what she's doing. Yeah. Yes. This is the amygdala. So what she's doing, this is a really, when we do emotional intelligence training, we often talk to kids about this. This is a very crude way of showing you what the brain looks like. So this is the amygdala, and sometimes known as your lizard brain or your emotional brain, right? This is the prefrontal cortex, or the big part of your brain, the logical part of your brain, okay? I don't know, but I'm going to trust you. That sounds good. And so, I promise I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming. Just hold that thought for me. Okay, so when we are in what's called emotional hijack, is this part of your brain, the amygdala, much smaller than the rest of your brain, but the amygdala is 80,000 times faster than your logical brain. So when you are having, it's why when you're having an emotional response, and often the one that, the two most extreme are anger or sadness, often tears, so they're the most visible. Your logical brain has left the building. I don't care who you are. I grew up in a family of scientists, like I said, and my sister was like, that doesn't happen to me. I'm 100% logical. And I was like, got news for you, kiddo, you're not. And in fact, you're in a scarier position because you're not aware of the emotional drivers, right? So you're going to make decisions without understanding why you're making them, thinking that they're logical. So every decision you make has an emotional basis. whether you are aware of it or not is about something we call emotional literacy. So I know I'm talking about a lot of different topics. At the end, I have a list of resources for you that I'll show you. So you can begin, think of this as a jumping off point if you want to go in any direction after this. So there's more information at the end about that. Yes.
A very simple example can be done in the class. Sometimes by your emotions as a teacher,
Okay.
you can change the whole idea of a student.
Yes.
Sometimes a student might not be familiar or liking the topic itself.
Yeah.
Not because the topic is not adopted to him, but because maybe he might face some difficulties in it. And by your emotions, by your talking to him, you might convince him in order to shift 180 degree. So emotions can play an important role in the class itself.
Absolutely, and I think you've brought up a really important point. When the amygdala is in charge, I will come to you, and then I haven't forgotten about it. There's a nice lady over here who's been waiting patiently for a very long time. When the amygdala is in charge, you cannot learn. You are not learning. The logical part of your brain has left the building. So, you had a big fight with your parents on the way to school, you're still upset, you're not learning. So there's a strategy in what you've just talked about. Sometimes people call that connect and redirect. So you connect with someone, you listen to what's happening, and then you try to help them soothe. And so there's another strategy called name it to tame it. So that is, if you name the feeling that you're having, it's psychologically soothing. And then you move in that direction.
And sometimes he might be directing himself to a wrong way, thinking that this is the right way. You can shift him also to the right way.
Ooh, danger. Because is it your right way?
No. From the point of view concerning the student.
I'm teasing you a little bit. Thank you. You've been waiting a very long time. Would you like
I was stuck thinking
Thank you for being patient.
of this expression here, emotions driven, or our drive people. Yani this is risky because we are about emotional intelligence, which is how to treat our emotions, understand our emotions and the others' emotions. But if we stick to this expression, it's really risky.
What makes you say that?
Because every people who are driven by emotions are not successful. Somehow they are not successful in their work. It has to be balanced between logic and emotions. That's why it comes to my mind when I saw the expression. Then the talk took me beyond this.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that. I want to respond to that and kind of redirect our thinking a little bit here. When I say emotions drive people, I don't mean people who are overly emotional, who express their emotions all over the place and don't have control of it. What I'm talking about is every person is driven by their emotions, everyone. And emotional intelligence is being able to understand what those emotions are, being able to use, so when in emotional intelligence we talk about emotions as data, so being able to use emotions as information for you about how you're living your life, about the decisions you're making, and trying to bring, again, it's very crude, but brain and heart together to make more balanced decisions. So when you live in one or the other, there are consequences to that. Yeah. No, thank you for asking that question. It was great. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about before we actually talk about happiness is as educators, we wear a lot of hats, right? We are mom, we are leader, we are counselor, we are person who has an expert subject knowledge, we are facilitator, we are coach, we are a lot of different things. So what I want to suggest to you now is that you take the hat of educator off and put on the hat of self. The reason I would like you to do that, or I'm asking you to do that, is social and emotional learning is really hard to talk about if you haven't done it yourself. It will come across as inauthentic. It won't translate to students, and students have the best detectors of inauthenticity of anyone that I've ever met. Kids know when you're not being genuine. They know, right? And often educators want to do stuff to kids for their own good, I mean, with good intentions, that we're not willing to do ourselves. And social and emotional learning has to start with you learning it and then sharing your experiences. So I'd like to invite you, it's your choice of course, to take off your metaphorical educator's hat and put on your hat of self. And as you're processing the information, think about how this works in your own life. And then you can have conversations about classroom, that's great, but I want you to think about yourself first. Is that okay? You don't like it, I can tell, but too bad. It's your choice. Okay, we are now actually going to talk about happiness. I think I'm going to skip that. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Okay, so don't go to Minty. Talk to somebody close to you. Thinking about happiness, what are the things that make you happy? So just really quickly, maybe 20 seconds, what makes you happy? New pair of shoes, nice piece of cake, what is it? Okay, I can tell that you're busy being happy. Can I ask you to stop being happy? No. Come back to me, please. Can I get a couple of examples of things that make people happy? Maybe from over here? Yeah.
That makes us happy. She said when she finishes all her work throughout the day, she feels happy.
Okay, so that sense of satisfaction?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. What about, yes?
You hear me? Okay. Oh, it's working. Okay, so when I do something relevant to me, regardless how small or tiny it is, if it's relevant, I'm really happy.
Can I ask you what you mean by relevant? Can you expand?
I mean, it means something to me. I'm doing it because of a reason that I understand why I'm doing it. So just connecting the why with what I'm doing during the day makes me way happier doing it. Then it becomes less of a chore and more of a enjoyable thing to do.
And is it connected to some kind of goal that you have or sense of purpose?
Yeah,
or why
usually
you do things?
to the sense of purpose more
Okay.
than the goal. Yeah, absolutely, not the goal.
Yeah. The goal is to get the marking done, right? Sense of purpose is to know that it helps your students grow. Yeah, great. How about somebody from this side? Ladies? Yeah. I heard shopping over here, so. Yeah.
I am happy with sometimes when I play with my daughter, because I feel it is alive, and am I still young? I can do many things in my life. So my daughter gives me the energy.
Somebody said hope, and now they're being shy. Well, you spend money. Okay. Yeah, great. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Any save money or spend money or both? I feel really happy when I save money spending money. Like if something's on sale, right? Right. Yeah.
I can say that everyone knows his key for happiness. And
I'm not so sure, but
no, I'm sure. Okay. Wait. Let me continue. Yes, I'm sure that every person knows his key for happiness. So me as a person, I'm happy when I see all people around me happy.
Okay. So I'm going to argue with you just a little bit. So I think what you've said is really lovely in that everyone knows their own key for happiness. And so that's what I was saying before about the wisdom lives within. Only you know, right? However, rates of depression would suggest as a world, we have lost touch with that a little bit. and actually quite a lot. And what I'm going to share with you are sort of global phenomena, or not phenomena, these are global things across culture, across time. These are the things that tend to build happiness. We'll talk about those in a moment. So, yes, please.
No, I think what you just mentioned has a lot to do with the media, because the media is sort of imposing on people the definition of happiness. So in a way, a lot of people don't get in touch within themselves to actually recognize what makes them happy.
I think that's a really important point. And there's this whole social media culture of the appearance of being perfect all the time and in happy all the time, right? So there's a whole lot of research about Facebook and how people only post the stuff they're really happy about, or when they're really angry. You get a bit of that too. One of the things that I want to make clear and at the very beginning is that happiness is not about being happy all the time. And I think the media puts a lot of pressure on us that if we feel sad, if we feel frustrated, if we feel negative emotions, that's part of the human experience, and that's okay. However, the media makes us feel that it's not, perhaps. I mean, there's definitely, I think, a pressure around being happy, and I think our kids feel that as well. And as adults, we feel that.
I just need to share something. For me today, happiness is when I attend a session and it meets my expectation. So because like we usually see some topics very specific and very nice, and when you go through the session, you sign out frustrated.
You're scaring me now. Okay. Is that a passive-aggressive way of saying the session's not? I'm teasing you. No, thank you. Okay, so let me tell you what the research says about happiness, okay? And there are a couple of things, well, actually, I'll leave that. So, happiness has a genetic component. Most things do. And everyone has a happiness set point, all right? And that is genetically determined. But that's only 50%. So that's why some people are just naturally happier than others, right? And it just is. It's about 50% of your happiness set point is about 50% of your happiness, though, okay? So you have control over it. You are not determined, your life isn't determined by your genetics in this case. About 10 to 15% is your life circumstances. So in a few minutes, we're going to look at how happy people are when they win the lottery, how happy people are after they get married. Yeah, that one always, there's a lot of opinions about that one. It's them, not us. Okay, this is not a battle of the sexes, boys. All right. But about 40%. Oh, now you're all talking about your marriages. Come back. So about 40% is the intentional activity. So the happiness practices that you cultivate. So we can't do much. We can't do really anything about our genetic set point for happiness. We have a little bit of control about our life circumstances, a little bit. But we do have a huge amount of control over our mindset and our habits. Okay? So that's where we're going to look. We're going to look in the green part. Yeah? Okay, so here's what the research says about happiness or happy people. So what I said to you before is in positive psychology, we look at the best of and we try to figure out what that is, and then we think about how to help people develop that and amplify that in people. Okay? So happy people are comfortable expressing gratitude. That's good. The research says that men are not as comfortable generally as women. I'm picking on you boys a little bit today, aren't I? Yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. So happy people are often the first to help others. So I was sort of teasing you guys over here, you know, when we're talking about shopping, and we're happy when we spend money, even happier when we save money spending money, right? So those are called hedonistic things, happiness, and those are fine, but they're very short term. So hedonistic happiness are things like shopping, acquiring things, eating a really nice piece of cake, drinking coffee. Now, I'm convinced that's just a recipe for happiness. But I'm an addict. So that hedonistic happiness is fine in moderation, but it only has a short-term effect. Okay? So even things like holidays. About 6 weeks later, the research says about 6 weeks after a holiday, you forgot you had it. For me, it's less, I think. It's like 3 days. We practice optimism for the future. So if we have time later, I'll show you what I mean exactly by optimism. But for optimism, one of the ways of looking at it is the 3 Ps. So is this something perseverant, something that is going to happen for a very long time? Is it pervasive? Is this going to change my whole life? And there's another P... Possible? No, that's a positive one. I can't remember. There's another P. I'll show you later. Okay? Peaceful. Lots of Ps. No, I can't remember now. So happy people savor pleasures and live in the present moment. So there is something, I think, to be said about that, especially, I don't know what it's like in Jordan, but in Singapore, people are constantly posting about what they're doing while they're doing it. I saw a group of young people celebrating their friend's birthday, 10 of them sitting around the table, all of them on their phones with their extra battery pack charged in so that they their phone didn't die while they were not talking to their friends, right? And so that's not living in the present moment. You've ignored the person for the technology, and to post the experience to people who you are not connected to, often who don't even know you, some of them. We make physical activity a habit. I heard somebody say that. I think it was you, Colm. You like swimming. You like exercise. It makes you happy. There's a lot of research that supports that. I remember that on days when I don't feel like doing it. Yeah. Are often spiritual or religious, so have a sense of higher purpose or calling. Are deeply committed to lifelong goals. So in the emotional intelligence courses that I train, we talk about your noble goal. So my noble goal is empowering others to live meaningful, connected, and fulfilling lives. It's what I'm doing now, I hope. But it's something I try to do in every interaction that I have, not just in my professional life, but across my life. So this is what happy people do. Let's talk about hedonic adaptation. So I promised you we'd talk about marriage, and I'm a little hesitant, but I want you to think about these life events. After this happens, how long do you think people are happy? So you try to give me a number. So after you win the lottery, how long are you happy?
It depends if your wife knows about it.
You're gonna love the next one. You have Rose's wife and your wife.
I think the red one, wealth is an important part of being happy, but only to a certain level. So once you've got enough to live comfortably, then that's not going to make a difference.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to repeat that column, that's really important, but I'll answer this question first. So winning the lottery, about 18 months. You're really happy because you get to spend, right? So you got the new Ferrari and the new suit, and you're looking fancy, nice holiday. But then then you end up being often disconnecting yourself from people in your life because they want money from you. So often these people lottery winners become really isolated, and money doesn't make them happy. So Colin was just saying that there is a graph that shows, so there's a positive correlation with happiness and income up to about middle class, basically. And so the number's different in every country, but if you can provide food for your family, you have a home, you're not worried about where your next meal's coming from, you've got a little money to go on a holiday, you don't need any sort of essential stuff, then that's where it stops. And actually, the more, if you're rich beyond that, then your happiness takes a nosedive. And it's quite a sharp decline, actually. Getting married, how long are you happy? Oh, that's a very positive answer. Yeah. Yeah. Nisreen has just said the longer the better. So there's more investment there. Very nice. Your husband's not watching, is he? Just so so this is your subjective measurement of how happy you are. So this is the research is based on your own self-rating of your own happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, getting married is a way of life, that this is a choice you make, then you should assume that the ups and downs of marriage is also part of being happy, because this is your life. So I would say getting married is, as a process, as a ceremony, of course, the event itself, but the lifestyle, you're always happy when you're
I'd say you have really good mental habits for happiness, and we don't all have them. Yeah.
If you have a recipe for when you're down and happy, please.
Well, that's nice. You can't be, you said that emotions are part of it. You're happy, and when you're sad, there's also good emotions. You have to be sad. Yep. So
it's the contrast where we live, right? Okay, I don't want to stay stuck with marriage. It's about 18 months. Happy for about 18 months, yeah. Having a child, another sort of life goalpost for a lot of people. How long are we happy? 24 minutes. Oh. That's very precise.
If you have a child, I mean, at some age you're happy, at some another age when they're teenagers, you're always happy having them. But
yeah.
You know, what is happy is unhappiness.
I just did, girl. Are you listening? I'm teasing. All right. So, having a child is interesting. So, what we're talking about is that little part of our pie chart that is your life circumstances, right? So often what happens is people will say, I will be happy when I'm married. I would be happy if I won the lottery. I will be happy when I have a child, okay? So you're right, life is up and down, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we don't want to be a parent and, you know, it's a hard day and that's fine. I'm not talking as much about the little variations. I'm talking more about your sort of, like, I'm really proud now to be a parent. It's been about 18 months. Yes.
You just mentioned that sometimes we say that happiness is never ending, it's inside. You want to be happy all the time.
So you're talking about that 40% of the habits and the mindset and the way that we practice and cultivate our own happiness. So, and you've led really nicely into my next point in a moment. But yes?
Research, when you say research, is it across the globe or in specific society?
Across the globe. So this is global.
Because I feel like I'm aware of different cultures, they have different parenting and loving.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about, there are a few differences and a little bit of variation, but the interesting thing is that this is pretty much the same across time and across culture. So the research on being a parent is really interesting, actually. Day to day, parents rate their subjective happiness lower, but then overall life satisfaction, if they look at the big picture, much higher. So, okay, last one. Yes. Yes. About 18 months. Yeah. I swear I'm building to a point you'll see in a moment. Okay, what about a major negative impact on in your life circumstances. So let's say, for example, you lose the use of your legs after a car accident. How long are you very unhappy? I mean, that's a really terrible situation. How long are you very unhappy?
18 months.
Yes, good, smart girl. She says it.
It's a trend.
Yes, so for major life circumstances, if you have a really negative impact to your life, you will adapt. And it's about 18 months. So the research, on amputees, on war veterans, all of this supports the first 18 months really hard, and then you adjust.
I think this research didn't touch the UAE result because we have the massive happiness there. The result will be different.
I don't know, so I'm not going to say anything, but I'm very curious. Yeah. Oh, interesting. But these are sort of general trends, right? So this is about 18 months as well. So my point here is to show you that little green part of the pie chart are our life circumstances has very little long-term impact on our happiness. You have the best thing happen to you ever, you get a lot of money, you get married, you have a baby, you kind of go back to your happiness set point unless you cultivate your own happiness. So your happiness is dependent on your habits. Okay? So happiness takes work. There is no magic thing that's going to come along and change you forever and so that you will be forever happy. And so what we want to think about are our dispositions and our habits, not external factors with happiness. Okay? So if you're thinking about students, they'll say, I'll be really happy when I get a good score on the exam. I would say that probably lasts about 18 minutes. Okay? Well, now we're getting philosophical. I want you to hold on to that question because your wisdom lives within. And I want to share some more things with you, but I can come back to that. Okay. Okay, so really quickly, the benefits of cultivating happiness, if you practice these habits, are that you're better professionally, you're better socially, you have better friends, and you actually have better physical health. And I'm going to talk to you later about the negative impact, the negative impact of negative emotions. Okay. Okay, so happier people are more creative, are more helpful, are more charitable. So when we were talking about your hedonistic happiness, so shopping, that piece of cake, coffee, as much as I hate to put it in that category, or your altruistic tendencies. So that is helping other people. And so the research supports that the more you, within limitation, the more you help other people, the more charitable you are, the more your happiness is externally focused, the more sustainable it is going to be. So there's a ton of research, for example, around volunteerism, and volunteers actually get more benefit from volunteering than the people that they volunteer for, often. Which makes some people cynical, but I don't see why, if you're giving up your time, you shouldn't get something out of it too. Happier people are more self-confident, and I think this goes back to your question about emotions drive people being a little bit risky. They have better self-control, better self-regulation, and coping abilities. So they're more resilient. They're able to make the best out of bad situations, all kinds of things. Okay, last bit of little research here. Did you know that when you are experiencing positive emotions, you actually literally have wider peripheral vision? Okay, so we're not talking about like fluffy stuff here. Like, so often emotional intelligence, all of this social emotional learning feels a bit woolly, feels a little bit touchy-feely, but there is research that supports the physiological, the neurological benefits of this. So there's a benefit in the classroom to having students be happy. They are going to be more creative, they'll be more resilient, they'll have better problem-solving abilities because they can literally and figuratively see more options. And if you take a moment to reflect on a time when you were really stressed, your vision narrows, you feel stuck often, you can't think of a way out of problems. Yeah? So the opposite, cultivating those positive emotions, will help you widen your vision again. Okay, before I move on, I feel like I did a lot of talking, and I want you to have a second to process. So why don't you take a minute and talk to an elbow partner about something that you were surprised by, confused by, interested in, applications for yourself, for your classrooms. So just a minute. Okay, I think you could probably continue these conversations well into the evening. So I am going to stop you because I want to show you some more things. I know I've done a lot of big picture stuff, but I know that you're also educators and you want some concrete things. So I'd like to do that now, if that's okay. Yeah? Okay, a little bit more research though, because you know me by now. So I want you to think about the best thing that has happened to you recently, okay? Oh, sorry, not yet. Don't think about the worst thing yet. Was it related to another person? So I want you, so either directly or indirectly, thinking about another person another person was present. So raise your hand if that's the case. So for those of you whose hands aren't raised, are you not sure or are you just tired? Not sure. Oh, raise your hand. Okay. All right. The average response to that, I think I have some people with broken arms here, perhaps, is about 90%. So it hovers around 90%. Okay, I want you to think of the worst thing that has happened to you recently. Again, was it related to another person? Mine certainly was. Woo. I had a really tough week at work last week, so I'm glad to be away from it, far, far away here. Okay. Again, that's usually about 90%. So I have some shy people, I think, here. So my point is, we are wired for connection. We spend, and I didn't want to put a percentage here because I'm a little hesitant to do that because, again, there are different set points for our need for connection, but between 85 to 95% of things that we think about, or sort of 80 to 95%, is devoted to thinking about other people. So this is, I think, really interesting. Social and physical pain share the same neurological process. Okay? So an easy way of thinking about this is why heartbreak is physically painful. It is actually physically painful, and they have done some research to support that. So what they did with university students is they made them feel isolated, basically told them nobody likes you, your friends said that you're stupid and they don't want to, whatever. Sometimes psychologists are not very nice. And so they gave the control group nothing, just made them feel isolated, and then they gave the other group aspirin. The people that took aspirin, a painkiller, felt less isolated. So, when we say things to students like sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me, it does. It physically is painful for you. You have a physiological response to isolation. Another piece of research, which is a little bit nicer, is they intentionally shocked people, which was painful. And then they had some people be touched by a loved one and some not. The people that were not touched by a loved one experienced more pain than those who were touched. So touch, connection, can make us feel less pain. And I promised you, I talked to you about the negative health effects of negative emotions. So feeling socially isolated or feeling lonely has the allostatic load, which is a fancy way of saying the wear and tear on your body, is the same as smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Yeah. So imagine you're a kid, or very often when I work mostly now with teachers, there are teachers in schools who feel like they go through the day and don't have any connection. Imagine the stress that that has on you and the impact that that has on your health. So again, we're not talking about this because it's in vogue and we like the fancy words or it's fluffy. This matters for our students and for our staff. So my point here is that healthy relationships are probably one of the most significant influences on our happiness and well-being. There's some really interesting research that shows where they isolate people, and basically they have to stop the experiments after about 5 or 6 days because people start to go crazy. And so the response is so negative, being isolated from people, that they can't cope. We are wired for connection.
I just need to make a comment on the previous slide.
Yeah.
We usually tend to avoid having pain more than striving for happiness. How does that sound?
Tell me more.
We usually tend to avoid having pain more than striving for happiness.
So your point is sometimes the pathway to being happy can be painful, so we have to make painful decisions. Is that what you mean? Or painful choices? I don't know. That's a good question. I want to. I'm hesitant to. No, I want to talk to you more about that. I'm not sure.
I think people, it's not just they become neutral rather than they avoid circumstances where it's they can feel the pain, the physical pain.
I mean for this slide, I avoid having a relationship because it may cause me pain better than having a healthy relationship.
That's what I mean.
You got my point?
Yes, okay. So there's some interesting research. I don't know if you guys know Brené Brown. She's wonderful. So she talks a lot about vulnerability. And so when you are not vulnerable, and I don't mean vulnerability in a negative way here. By vulnerability, I mean open to connection, of sharing, of being authentic. It has really negative impact on your life. So some people make that choice because it's scary, and being vulnerable is scary, but it does have a negative impact. Yes?
For example, in the school, we have from the staff one who makes you always in this situation that he doesn't want to get If I be away from Hakka, we are in the same school. Should I leave the school to be happy?
Is this a hypothetical question? Okay. Okay. So he's talking about avoiding pain. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually just going to completely redirect us to something else I want to talk about. Is that okay? So I'll save time for us at the, or I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards, and this often happens. But I do want to show you a few things, and I think shortly I'm coming up with something that will answer your question. So my point is, and when we're thinking about school culture, other people are what help soothe us in difficult times. So we need connection. And so it has to be at the center of an ethos of a school. Has to be. For staff. And so often I go and do emotional intelligence training for schools. And the first thing I do is get teachers to connect. And they go, wow, we haven't done that in a very long time. Because they're so focused on the kids. But that's what I mean by the process is the content. So we have to live these things. We have to be models of these things. So a lot of you know Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset, and we're not going to talk about that today, but I don't know if you know that she has other dimensions of her work, and she talks about belonging and purpose and relevance. We're not going to talk about purpose and relevance, but just so you know that it's there. But we are going to talk about belonging. So I put, do students and teachers believe they belong in the school? Because there's just as much bullying of teaching staff amongst teachers, if not more, than there is of kids. So belonging is a basic human need. It's when we feel valued and respected. So when we're talking about belonging, and so I promise I'm getting more concrete now, every interaction matters. So what I'd like you to do now is just look at someone and one of you decide, or one of you smile, and one of you decide not to smile. So one of you be the smiler, and one of you not smile, okay? And I want you to try it and see how it feels, okay? So for example, would you smile at me? Okay, come back to me. Most of you didn't do it because it feels so unkind, right? I saw a lot of you tried not to smile and then you started smiling anyway. Yeah. Well, and you're connected, right? Okay, so come back to me. There's something called mirror neurons, which you probably have heard of. And this means we mimic the behavior of people around us, right? And this leads to emotional contagion, right? So if you smile at somebody who's not smiling, what usually happens? You stop smiling. Okay. Sometimes. Usually they smile back, even if it's sort of half-hearted, right? And you've probably had the experience where you've had a really tough day and somebody smiles at you and it just kind of brightens your whole day or kind of shakes you out of your own head a little bit, right? And so now both people are smiling. We are also wired to self-protect if we're vulnerable. And smiling is a way of showing vulnerability, a way of showing I want to connect with you, right? So if you smile at somebody who's not smiling and they don't smile back, what happens? Abort, right? Yeah. It makes you unhappy, right? And you move away from it. Now, when we're talking about school culture, I have here every interaction matters. No, not that we have to be perfect all the time. And there's something I don't have time to show you, but you should, if you have, it's 3 minutes long. Google the still face experiment. And what you'll see is a baby and a mother not responding to the baby. If you've seen it, it's really hard to watch, actually. But I think babies, because they don't have any defense mechanisms, it's the easiest way of seeing it. And so the baby just kind of loses it. And but I think it's really useful for us as adults because if you scale that up to the classroom or in interactions in staff meetings, outrageous behavior is often from pain and feeling like you don't belong. Smiling, yeah, sure. You want to be not smiled at. Okay. Okay, so how this impacts learning is that when we feel like we don't belong, we spend our cognitive energy searching for clues instead of learning, right? So if you think about, some of you may have come here alone today. I did, right? And luckily, like in Jordan, everyone's so friendly, so I only felt this way for about 2 minutes, just as I stepped outside of the hotel. But I was thinking, how am I gonna find somebody to talk to, and where am I gonna sit, and what happens when I get there? You know, and I'm a professional. I'm a grown-up. Like, this is what I do. I talk to people. But I was thinking about that this morning. And luckily, I had 2 lovely ladies who offered to drive me over, and we were fast friends, and it was very easy. But we spend a lot of energy thinking about this, especially when we don't feel these things. I'm going to leave that. Because I want to talk to you about flourishing relationships. So you were talking about a difficult colleague earlier. So often when we talk about school culture, when we talk about building a positive place to be, we're looking at macro, we're looking at so many big things. But my point here is that we want to look at micro. We build culture in the moment, in the interactions, day to day, moment to moment. And so Barbara Fredrickson talks about how if a relationship is flourishing or not is a balance between positive and negative interactions. Okay? So negative interactions happen in any relationship. It's okay. But when it's out of balance, there's less tolerance for it. So the relationship, or the ratio, is about 3 to 5, depending on the health of the relationship over time, 3 to 5 positive interactions to 1 negative one. So the first time I saw this, I was thinking about a difficult student that I had. Darius, was 10 years ago, can still remember his name. And I actually wrote myself a Post-it note on my little clipboard that said, just say nice things to Darius today. Because our relationship had gotten so diseased, we were probably 25 negative interactions to 1 positive. And it took about a week of me doing that until our relationship turned around. Because there wasn't trust there, right? We needed the number of positive interactions to buffer that negative, to go, okay, well, that's just an outlier, that Leslie was having a bad moment, but she'll come back. I trust that she will be okay. Yeah? Okay. The last thing that I want to show you, which I think is really useful and really practical, is a framework called active constructive responding. So again, culture is built in the moment, how we respond to people. And so active constructive responding is how you respond to somebody's good news. Showing empathy is how you respond to somebody's negative news. We aren't going to talk about that, but there are really specific strategies you can do as well. So this is hopefully quite easy to understand. So we want to be in the green, amplify, when people share good news with us. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So your colleague tells you they got a great promotion. They're really excited. You can choose to respond in one of 4 ways. You could deflate. Oh, well, that means a lot of late nights for you. It's not very nice, is it? My mother and I struggled with our relationship. Our ratio was quite negative to positive because parents want to care for their children and they worry about every choice that they make. So there was a lot of deflating comments. Ooh, are you sure about that? That's a bit risky. I'm surprised you made that decision. You know, those kinds of things. We do that a lot as teachers as well. Steal. This is my tendency, I have to say. So your colleague says, I've had this great promotion, and you go, oh my God, I had a promotion once. Did I ever tell you about it? Right? It's the Leslie show now, right? Yeah. I know my patterns. That's me. Because I think that's a way of connecting, and I want to show, I'm so excited because I'm connecting to something that a similar experience, which I think is showing empathy. It's not. It's taking away from their moment. Stall. Oh, I got this great promotion. Oh, that's nice. Not negative, but am I excited to share my news with you next time? No. Okay. Versus amplifying. wow, that's really wonderful. I'm so pleased for you. You're going to be great in that role. You know, when did you find out? Tell me more. How did it happen? Who are you going to be working with? You know, questions, amplifying, allowing the person to share more of that positive experience. Do we have a second for you to try it? No, we don't. Okay. So what I want you to think about as you're going away is, I'll share one more thing with you. Your interaction patterns are, again, how we build culture, how we respond to people in the moment. Is it positive? Is it negative? Are we the person that always steals their happy news? Are we the person that deflates them when they're excited about something? Are we the person who means well but tells them how to solve their own problem and disempowers them? So this is the last thing that I want to share, and then I promise I'll let you go, and I'll stick around for questions if you have them. So in an organization, people relate to others in different ways: friendly, hostile, neutral, coldly, impatiently, aggressively, generously, arrogantly, with humility, anxiously, excitedly. The list seems endless. These micro experiences on a daily basis of relating to others and how that is experienced makes up our experience of the organization, our lived experience of its culture. So never mind what the fancy words say on our values statement or our promise to staff. It is the lived quality of our daily encounters that constitutes the organizational water in which we swim. So in Singapore, it's really common to put up big words like respect, responsibility, blah, blah, blah. But you have to live that and breathe that in your everyday interactions. And hopefully you'll be happy. So thank you very much, guys. I know we're over time, so I'm going to shut up.